You get that feeling? You feel like an outsider? Do you feel like there is a group of people who have it on lock, who are always on the inside? Do you feel like your writing, music, design, poetry, fashion is constantly on the outside, not accepted by the group? Are you convinced that there's a group of artists who are showing in the right galleries, profiled in all the best publications, interviewed on all the best podcasts, that they are on the inside? Are you plagued by the idea that you're on the outside, that they're on the inside? I'm about to show you how your position as an outsider in your chosen discipline is actually the power position structurally, and I'm going to give you strategies on how to turn what you believe to be one of your greatest weaknesses into an advantage. Now, no cap, this video uses examples from the fields of visual art and design, but the ideas are applicable to music, performance, writing, poetry, even simply being a teenager. The basic ideas are applicable just to life itself. Anywhere where you feel as if you're an outsider and are struggling to understand how to turn a perceived negative structural relationship to a field into one of your greatest assets. But in order to shed light on this process, I'm going to have to bring you back once again to 1995 and my own story. Now, after getting fired from Elektra Records, I started my own design firm and type foundry entitled the Apollo Program. Now, under this name, I designed typography and sold typefaces and did design work for a variety of clients in and around the New York City area. And as part of this process, what I would do is I would design letter forms and typography, and then design, print, and produce, and then snail mail limited edition prints announcing these fonts. One of these prints, and one of the first prints that I did in 1995, was entitled The Conversion of St. Paul. Now, it announced a typeface. It announced three typefaces, one of which was the family Mothra Parallax. Now, this font was really about taking hiragana letter forms and making them read as Roman characters. Hiragana is part of the Japanese writing system. On the left, you can see the essential letter forms altered to read as Roman characters. Now, for the first time, I'm releasing Mothra, the original cut of this font from 1994, available for $50 in the link both above and in the description below. Now, relax. The typeface and this print have a structural relationship to the point that I'm making. I was on the grind trying to launch my quote unquote design firm. But basically what I was a freelance designer, if we're keeping it real, on the hustle, on the grind in Manhattan. One of my clients at the time was the Voyager company, Criterion Collection, and Janus Films. Now, I was doing CD-ROM and laser disc film packaging work for them. They had this absolutely killer office on Broadway and Lafayette Broadway in Soho. Now, I was designing packaging for projects like Fishing with John and Kurosawa's Throne of Blood, and I would make weekly treks into their office when I was working on projects with them. And at one particular design meeting at the Criterion Collection, one of their production people happened to mention that they saw some of my recent work featured in the most recent issue of Print Magazine. Now, Print Magazine, the media landscape was quite a bit different in the 1990s than it is, but it's on further prodding. They went on to mention that I should probably brace myself for the way that print was featuring my work. They featured The Conversion of St. Paul, this print that you see on the screen, in the parody issue. Now, the issue that I'm showing on the screen is not the literal parody issue. This was 29 years ago, so I can't find the actual issue, but when he handed me a copy of the magazine, my work was towards the back of the publication and under a headline that read something to the effect of, "We couldn't have made this up if we tried." The clear implication being that the work that I was making was absolutely absurd. And as I mentioned, this was 29 years ago, and I can't find the actual issue. If someone out there has the issue, let me know. But here I was on the grind at 28 years old, making the most ambitious work that I could, the most ambitious work that I knew, effectively being ridiculed by the graphic design magazine of record. Now, it's important to point out that this was demoralizing, but I bookmark this because it's this story, because it is an important parable that we'll come back to later, that I think bears structural relationship to the major theme of this video. Now, so with hindsight, this event seems inconsequential, but I can't stress enough how depressing, demoralizing, and deflating this experience was in the moment. I truly felt like an outsider to my own field. But what we can see here is we can see a pattern, and we see it over and over in our culture, how the outsider becomes the insider, and structurally how the outsider becomes the insider. Effectively, I think there are two paths that we can think of. We can think of the front door, and we can think of the back door. Now, most artists are not lucky enough, most, not all, there are a select few, but most artists are not lucky enough to be welcomed immediately through the front door of major cultural institutions, magazines, publications. And if we go back to this sensation that I spoke about earlier in this video, that there are the right galleries, the right museums, the right performance venues, or the right publishing houses, the right podcasts, the most prevalent dynamic, quite frankly, is to arrive through, figuratively speaking, through the back door. What does this mean? Well, first of all, critical to this dynamic is to stop asking for acceptance. If you can't go in the front door, you go in the back door. And we can see this. A couple of years ago, I was at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in Manhattan and happened to walk into the Comme des Garçons Ray Kawakubo show at the Met. Now, every writer or designer or musician has to find their own path, but upon seeing the Comme des Garçons show at the Met, it was a stark reminder to me that that there are two paths, and that the Met, there is no more establishment venue in visual arts than the Metropolitan Museum of Art in Manhattan. And to walk into that show highlights, I think, the idea that above all else, the capacity to build an audience over time through the absolute strength of your artistic vision, that may be the most effective and direct path to the inside. So over time, each artist is ultimately judged by the quality of their ideas and of their work. Now, Ray Kawakubo's show at the Met displayed this idea incredibly powerfully and echoes the sentiment expressed by Skrillex upon the receipt of his recent Grammy.
The first thing I want to say to anybody young out there who wants to make music or an artist, the best advice I ever got was success is something that you attract, not something that you try to chase or catch.
Success is something that you attract, not something that you try to chase or catch. This, to my mind, brings home and drives home the point that you don't actually, when you arrive, you don't actually arrive anywhere. There is no there. There is no massive hall containing everyone who has made it. When you arrive, you don't actually arrive anywhere. There are art worlds on top of art worlds on top of art worlds on top of art worlds. It is turtles. It is turtles all the way down. So if you can make your work, if you can sustain yourself off of your work, you have won. There is only and there's an almost archetypal pattern that we see over and over again, where the outsider becomes the insider. We see this pattern in everything from tech companies like Tesla and Apple Computer, through literature, through things like The Catcher in the Rye, or The Devil Wears Prada, or in Harry Potter, and even in the civil rights movement, we see a very specific dynamic.
When I ask for it.
And even in the civil rights movement, we can see the dynamic of the outsider becoming central to the discourse. And here we are at possibly the most important idea in this episode. Many young artists, I think, fail to realize the stark reality that they simply don't have the work. The kiss of death for an artist, quite frankly, is to think that opportunity will magically appear before you've built the appropriate work. So when an artist, as an example, visits the Tate Modern in London or the Whitney High Line, they make the mistake often of thinking, I could make work like this if they gave me the show. I'd make work at this scope, at this ambition, and at this scale. Or if Metro Boomin or Drake signed me, I'd produce a killer record. These are logical fallacies. They're traps that are the kiss of death to the artist. Most artists fail to realize the stark reality that they simply don't have the work. They don't have the work. The key to turning the outsider status into a positive is a shift in thinking at that moment, at this moment, coming to the profound realization that there's absolutely nothing keeping you from making the work that fits into the idealized context in this moment. This is the key to turning the outsider status, to beginning to turn the outsider status into an asset rather than a liability. You will not get the show, the record deal, or the book contract if you walk into your studio and you don't have the actual finished material objects. If you walk into your studio and you don't have the actual material objects, the paintings, prints, sculptures, songs, manuscripts that are of the size, scale, scope, and ambition of your idealized context, the museum, gallery, record company, or publisher will not give you access to those things that you want. The work is made before the opportunity appears, not after. So the key to this entire process is to begin with the end in mind, to visualize the end product. Do you have that thing? Do you have a gallery full of paintings, a record full of songs, a novel full of words, a studio full of garments? Opportunities are not happening because you don't actually have the work. You will not have a show at a museum until you have a studio full of museum scale work. Not before. You won't have a successful novel until you have a final draft. The pattern repeats. Your status as an outsider is necessary. The answer to becoming an insider is to arrive through the back door. You arrive at the center by starting at the periphery. You build the exact body of work of the appropriate ambition, scale, and scope before you expect the opportunity. Now we're going to go back to our story that we left at the beginning, where I felt depression and dejection after being ridiculed by, as a young designer, by being ridiculed by print magazine, and how print magazine ridiculed this print, The Conversion of St. Paul. Well, In 2001, 6 years after the release of the print, the conversion of St. Paul was included in the permanent collection of the Cooper Hewitt National Design Museum. And the point is that the pattern is real. Power moves from the outside to the inside.